So we've a little bit of information to give out actually in terms of what's coming. So at the top of the session, we talked about public good and social value. There is, of course, we all know that we have left the European Union. There is a new set of regulations for public procurement that will, we understand, will be a white paper by the end of this year and should be assented to law spring-ish time in 2022. And social value is an area that the Public Services Act says in law that social value must be considered when any public procurement is being run. So it is the duty of the public procurer to consider what social outcomes can be delivered for every pound of public money that's being spent. But actually in the new regulatory environment, that does increase its traction and that does become really much more integrated into the procurement space. And so what you'll see is whilst cost, price, all of those traditional things will remain important, you will see a shift that will be more about being value driven, and some of that will be about the social and economic value as well as the financial value. And some of the areas that will be much more prevalent in the regulatory environment going forward will be around creating new businesses, new jobs and new skills. And so that really ties into that local economic development space. Thinking about climate change, reducing waste and improving supplier diversity, innovation and resilience. So all the things that we've talked about already today are becoming much more baked into the regulatory environment. And so as a small business who aspires to either grow or start out in the public sector, those things are really positive because there is a real driver for public procurement not to be so price focused. As a procurement professional, procurement professionals are not going to apologise for taking it seriously around the cost of goods and services. However, there is a balancing act to be had between value and value. Price, cost and value are different things. And so there should be a shift in moving more towards value-driven procurement. And lots of public sector organisations are already on that journey, not waiting for the regulatory environment to change. But it's worth noting as a small business that you should see a tangible shift over time of those things shifting. And of course, climate change, carbon reduction, net zero are really important agenda. Already, anything over 5 million in terms of tender, if you are bidding for it, you will be required to have a net zero strategy. But of course, any organisation, regardless of size, will be thinking about, or should be thinking, or will be asked to think about their road to net zero. So there's lots of support out there at the minute and lots of information. And one of the things we in Go for Growth talk to the public sector about is the unification of these messages. So whilst the headline of net zero carbon might be the same, the manifestation of that at a place-based or a contracting authority level might be different. And so we're encouraging lots of unity if we can, which I think leads on to planned procurements. We have a national policy statement that has just been issued in June this year. What that says is that public sector organisations should publish at least 18 months in advance, preferably or ideally 5 years out. Now, having worked in public sector procurement, that's no small ask actually, looking 5 years out. But looking at planned procurements at least 18 months out should be really helpful for business organisations who are looking to see what opportunity there is. And again, I think the same as with net zero carbon and the pipelines, it would be interesting to explore with Ian whether Bradford or organisations might come together to publish those things in one place, or will work together to pull a net zero carbon strategy approach together so that smaller organisations aren't having to do small variations of the same thing time and time and time again.
So in terms of the pipeline, or what we at Bradford would call our forward procurement plan, I'm kind of really supportive of the idea. But I think for it to be effective, there's a lot of challenges that need to be overcome, both from a local authority perspective and nationally as well. And that ties into some things that you said there about working together. So from my perspective, when I think about trying to draw together this forward procurement plan, it kind of splits into two types of contracts. So there's the contracts that are in a circular sort of environment that we will always buy, and they will be renewed through a new procurement every 3 or 4 years. And I think every contracting authority will have that contracts register, and it would just be a case of transposing that and mapping that for the next 5 years, because they will always come up. I think the more complex driven stuff, which is like regeneration or building roads or things that rely on external funding, I think there's more of a challenge there. And actually the challenge is to be more organised is the very simple sort of basis of what we need to be, to draw those into the forward procurement plan, as we would call it, and then get that published. I think from a perspective of a supplier, what we need as either smaller groups or nationally is a database that's indexed, so it's not X amount of spreadsheets from every contracting authority with their list of procurements that becomes really almost quite hideous to search, and actually it just becomes an administrative function. So what I hope that the white paper and the new regs introduces is an indexed system that we can all feed consistent information in there that actually becomes really useful for suppliers. What we're looking at in terms of Bradford is working either within the place base again with our district partners, and possibly extending that to West Yorkshire, and I'm sure there's a conversation to be had with the other local authorities in the Yorkshire and Humber about how is the most efficient way to display this information to the suppliers that we want to work with.
Brilliant. Thank you. And that, I think, plays into market assessment also. So the National Policy Statement is calling for procurement teams to assess the market health, and really to drive that supplier diversity, innovation and resilience piece also, which is a real positive for small to medium enterprises and voluntary sector organisations.